Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back to the Starcraft 2 Own It Shack. It's David here bringing you another Mech first-person commentary. So this is the continuation of my Mech Master League Quest series. This is not a ladder game, this is a game I played after a ladder game. So I played this Zerg opponent on the ladder and beat him on Whirlwind, and he wasn't satisfied with leaving it at that, so he decided to challenge me to a rematch, and I gladly accepted. So that's why we're on a different map here. Now anyway, before I get into this game, let me just quickly clarify something. So I promised in my last video I'd let you guys know where I was for a few months there. And, you know, I actually wasn't really playing much StarCraft for the first little while just due to, just a bit of soreness in my thumb. And that was caused by switching my hotkeys. Now, I've been really interested in switching my hotkeys for a long time because, I play a style that's pretty much the standard with a few random hotkey quirks mixed in that I've sort of accumulated over the years. And I feel like this style was really holding me back because I would miss keys a lot. My wrist would have to move up and down the keyboard quite rapidly in order to maintain my APM. This was not a situation that I liked, so I decided that I would go ahead and switch them to what is known as the core hotkeys. Jack Attack is the guy that came up with this, along with a whole bunch of community involvement on Reddit. Or, sorry, not Reddit, on Team Liquid. And you can see it there if you're interested. It's called the core. Now, I actually adapted the core to take out all use of the thumb, because my thumbs don't really like the way that the core operates. So I moved everything to the left side of the keyboard, and instead of using the thumb for the modifier keys, I used the pinky. It works really well for me, but unfortunately, switching to this style dropped me down to Silver League, so it was very rough. The first few weeks playing with this new style were extremely difficult. I'd say it was verging on demoralizing. It was so difficult. I really felt like I was playing on a Dvorak keyboard or something. It was so bizarre. But I now feel 100% comfortable with these new hotkeys, and I feel great. And I've made my way back up to Diamond with them. Things are great. I'm feeling way less tired playing. And I would recommend any of you guys check this out if it's something that you're interested in. So, returning to this game, this is a mech game. As you already saw from the commentary there, my opponent's not too fond of mech. He thinks it's an A-move style, and this is a common sentiment I see. But you know what? It really actually takes a lot of skill to do mech. I'm not saying it's harder than any other style, but it takes different kinds of skills. It's all about positioning, sieging your tanks, and having your Hellions in the right spot to soak up the damage for those siege tanks. It also very much relies on having that correct... the best way to describe mech is that it's a reactive style. In mech, you are not calling the shots. Your opponent is, and you have to react to their decisions with your own tech choices. For instance, you make Vikings against Broodlords. You make more siege tanks against Ultralisks, or in Protoss versus Terran, you'll have those Vikings against, say, a Stargate switch, and so on and so forth. Mech is truly the ultimate reactionary Terran style. That's why I love it. And as you can see here, I love getting that early Reaper in mech because it allows you to scout things like this. So what have I seen so far? Well, I've scouted all the potential third base locations and have seen nothing. He's got a Roach Warren, and sorry, I just missed it, but I did scout that he was going for lair. I think he's already on getting the lair on the way, and that actually changes what I do here. So you see, my initial fear here was that it was going to be a Roach all-in. Now, this was actually a misread by me. You see, when you guys see a lair and only two bases, it's actually one of two things. It's either going to be Spire play or a Nidus. Now, neither of those really require you to move your SCVs to the main, so this was kind of a knee-jerk reaction by me, and I even recognized it in the game. Probably wasn't the best move. But in either case, what you need to do is figure out, is this going to be that Spire play, or is it going to be the Nidus Worm? Because each requires a different reaction. In either case, you're going to need more factories, so I drop a second factory earlier than I would have gotten normally, and I get a siege tank out. The siege tank you need versus Spire or Nidus, it's extremely important because he does have that Roach Warren out, so he can come in at any moment. So, siege tank is out, and now I'll be going back in with the Reaper to scout once again. So you can see, there it is. I'm going to see what's going on here. So as you can see, I scout the Spire. This is important. I get an engineering bay immediately and an armory. These were actually a little bit... The engineering bay is on time. The armory is late. If you're going to get an armory this late, you kind of need to scout the spire a little bit sooner. So, that's okay. Although the armory's late, you can still survive. You just need to overmake turrets while you get that Thor out. So what I do here is that as soon as that engineering bay finishes, I'm going to put roughly 3 to 5 turrets up in strategic locations so that the mutas can't actually do any damage. I'll also run around with these Hellions. I was just trying to see if he had a third base there or not. So as you can see, turrets are going up. You got to get them in all these different spots and make sure you have some by your production facilities as well, or they'll pick off those add-ons, which can be extremely annoying. Now I'm kind of banking my minerals and gas here, waiting for that armory to finish so I can get a Thor immediately. There's really no sense just blowing all that gas and minerals on other stuff while you wait. So as you can see there, the armory's finished, Thor's on the way, and the turrets are up just in time to deflect those mutalisks. So I do send my Hellions out at the same time just to hopefully do some damage. And I was actually worried that he was going to suicide onto that turret, so I brought my SCVs up. Turns out he was more prudent than that. He's actually a very good opponent. So as you can see, I scout the third base with the... Actually, I don't know if it's a third base. I scout an additional base, we'll call it that, with the Hellions, and I return home. So I know he's, you know what, he's realized he's not going to get damage done with those mutas. He's going to build another base, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same. Thor is out, so now I'm totally safe against the mutas, but I will get an extra Thor. General rule of thumb, guys, if you're against mutalist play, go up to 3 Thors. 3 is enough to crush pretty much any number of mutas, provided they don't make every single larvum into a mutalisk. So that's what I like to do. In addition, you can see I got that second armory. That's going to be to get double upgrades going, extremely important. And the mutas are now harassing the natural. So that turret delays it just enough so I can bring my Thor down. Don't really lose too much here, little health on the what's it called, the refinery there, and a few SCVs, but overall not a big deal. You'll always want to remake those turrets, by the way. That's pretty important. So now I got vehicle weapons, vehicle plating on the way, and 3 factories. Normally when you're on 2 bases, you want to have 1 starport and 3 factories producing. The problem is that when you're against mutalists, the starport isn't actually that useful. The starport is actually more useful when you're facing a ground-based army, and you can then make some Vikings from that starport and go hunt overlords and do a bit of scouting in his main. But against mutas, your Vikings will simply just get killed and picked off too easily, so it's not really worth doing. Instead, you're just going to drop scans. So I can see, okay, cool, he's going to be going for Hydras and Lurkers, as you can see there. That did reveal the morphing Lurker Den, which is fine. That means I can now safely cut Thor production at 3 and just go ahead and get siege tanks. Siege tanks are going to be your bread and butter unit against a ground composition. And despite the Hydra buff, that was, the patch 3.8 Hydra buff, because they've been brought down a bit since then, siege tanks once again deal very well with Hydras when the siege tanks are sieged. Otherwise, you'll kind of get owned. So that's actually a pretty decent number of mutalisks, but 3 Thors is still enough that he's going to come out way behind if he suicides onto it. Also, I'll be moving over to my third base location. You know, I'm not too familiar with this map, so this might not be the optimal third base location, but it's the one I decided to go for, and as you can see, extremely annoying. He has an overlord in position. Now, I send my army over to deal with that, and because I'm worried about a run by roaches, I actually siege those 2 tanks at my main ramp. That's very important. You don't want to have roaches and hydras kind of just, you know, suiciding into your main like that. And that's one of the main weaknesses of mechs. You gotta assume your opponent's gonna do smart moves like that when you move out, and he sees it. So now third base can land comfortably, get my 2 additional gases going. That's very important. And as you can see, the lurkers are now out, so I almost lose a Thor here because I didn't scan it in time. But to be honest, lurkers are actually not the greatest tech choice against siege tanks and mech in general. As you can see there, siege tanks just outrange the lurkers. So, you know, that's pretty much it. They outrange a static unit. So, you know, lurkers are kind of just bad siege tanks in this matchup. It's not like in Protoss versus Zerg where the lurkers can actually hold ground against the relatively short-range Protoss army. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to keep making siege tanks and hopefully scan his main in time to detect a tech transition. Now against lurkers, I do enjoy getting a Raven, so you can see the tech lab going down on that starport. That's just going to be for one Raven. I'm not a Raven spammer by any means. But in any case, you know guys, against lurkers in this quantity, it's pretty much fine to just scan anyway. As you can see here, your minerals really don't matter. I'm not macroing particularly well this game either, so it's not a big deal. By the way, the reason this is bad macro is because I actually didn't get my additional factories up in time. Typically, you should have 5 or 6 factories and 1 starport constantly producing once you're up to 3 bases. As you can see here, I actually only have 3 factories right now. You know, I've got the 4th and 5th on the way, but they're too late. You shouldn't ever have minerals like this. In fact, it might even be a good idea to overmake factories when you get behind like this, just so you can max out. So, scan goes down as soon as he morphs that spire into a greater spire. So I know that this is actually going to be some Broodlord play. Now he keeps suiciding units in here like this, but he does have more bases than me, so it's not really a big deal for him. Ideally, you wouldn't want to suicide those units, but chances are he's making supply for some more corruptors so you can make broodlords eventually. I'll be moving my 4th base down. Probably should have had a Viking out by now to clean up overlords blocking my bases. Now, let's talk about broodlords for a second here. I didn't actually play this right. In general, against broodlords, what you want to do is have tons and tons of Vikings, a few Thors in their anti-air mode, their strong anti-air mode, and many siege tanks to deal with broodlings and whatever's underneath the broodlords. Now, that means that as soon as you see the greater spire, you need to have starports on the way. Now, I have 3 starports here. It's actually not enough. I would recommend going for 4 starports against broodlords if you're on 4 bases. That's going to let you get out enough Vikings that you can kill those broodlords with ease. In fact, the optimal composition against broodlords is actually, in my opinion, this is just, and you know what, it really depends on what league you're playing, but against most opponents, you can actually get away with very few Thors. You might even be able to have massive amounts of Vikings, maybe a Raven or 2, and a ton of siege tanks. The siege tanks will annihilate everything underneath the broodlords, then you simply unsiege the tanks, withdraw them, go in with the Vikings and clean up the broodlords, and save those siege tanks for later. You can even suicide them on a few of his expansions. So you can see I did a push against his top base, but probably not enough damage, and I don't have the Vikings out yet. And in fact, I'm so late on the Vikings that I didn't even bother putting reactors on those starports, which is really bad. That's like having essentially only 3 starports instead of 6, which is what you'd have if you had 3 reactored starports. So not really the best, but you know, there's lots of room for improvement. That is why I'm still in the Diamond League, of course. So I'm sieging up the tanks, going in and cleaning up this harassment, which is extremely annoying to deal with for sure. And the Raven does come in handy here, although I did have a few turrets left over. So you guys get the drill. I know the broodlords are on the way by this point, so I'm trying to get as much as I can in the way of strong anti-armored anti-air. Does that even make sense? Anti-armored anti-air? I hope so. I'm not really sure. But my scouting has been lackluster this game. Normally what you guys want to have going on here is a Hellion or 2 patrolling the entire map. Just patrol every single expansion that could potentially take with those 2 Hellions. That way you can send small squadrons of siege tanks and Hellions up to destroy them while your main army engages his. In fact, just so you guys know, in a mech versus broodlord battle, you actually have superior mobility than him. Because broodlords are very slow, and they consume valuable supply. In other words, your army versus the stuff under the broodlords isn't even a fair fight. You'll crush any ground army with your mech. It's really the broodlords that are scary. So finally I do scout that base, but who knows how long that's been mining, and of course I missed this one earlier. So what I'm going to do here is try to siege this base and kill it, and hopefully have enough Vikings that I can deal with those broodlords. Now, big mistake here. You guys just saw I spammed a ton of factories. That's way, way late. Those should have been up a lot earlier so I could mass Thors, depending on if he goes back into mutas or whatever. Also got some harassment going on up there. I do kill that base, but Broodlords are definitely out now, and I need to get the heck out of there. That's actually why I retreated. So, meanwhile, I scan, still no Ultralisk test, and as you can see, I get caught in a really bad spot. I drop PDDs to hopefully soak up a lot of this damage, but as you guys can see here, I don't have nearly enough Vikings to deal with this. So, like I promised you, the ground army gets annihilated by the siege tanks, but there's nothing left over to kill the Broodlords and Corruptors, so this is a very bad situation. And because I was caught in that awkward spot, I couldn't actually move my army towards his bases and use it to suicide on some of them. Just really bad army movement in general from me here. Cost me a huge portion of my resources. So I do have that 5th base up now, but not really adequately saturated. That was late as well. You can see this is the difference between a Diamond League player and a Master. They're going to have a lot more stuff here. I also try to get Desperation Starports out to hopefully curb this damage. Now, because the siege tanks aren't really useful anymore, given that I just destroyed his ground army and the siege tanks don't shoot up, I'm going to be sending those out to hopefully kill some of those bases while his main army's occupied here at my 3rd. Now, I'll be moving those over to my 5th, while he goes ahead and moves in with the big stuff. But right now, I'm kind of hemorrhaging economy. It's really bad when you have to lift your bases like that. Also, he's a smart player. After he lost his army like that, he replenished with a lot of Hydralisks. That's really good. When you reset the siege tank count like this, your Hydras become infinitely more powerful in a situation like this, because now I can't really move in with the Vikings to kill his Broodlords. But fortunately for me, that move out with the siege tanks has paid off, and I've actually managed to kill 2 of his bases while this is going on. So don't feel like I'm in a terrible spot yet. Also, tremendous mistake by him. He moves the Broodlords up over bare land while the Hydras are stuck on the low ground. That actually allows me to pick off a few with the Vikings. Probably could have even gotten more if I had reacted quickly enough. So, now that he's got a bunch of Hydras, I actually need siege tanks. Thors are really not what you want here. This is part of the danger of having Thors against Broodlords. Like I said, a couple can be okay if he's got maybe Mutalisks mixed in or something else, but in general, it's not what you want. Also, great positioning on the siege tanks there, but you cannot allow his Hydras to kill them. As you can see here, the Vikings were out of position, and that allows the Broodlords to come in and deal tremendous damage. Broodlings are also giving vision of the high ground, and not only do I lose siege tanks, I also lose a couple Thors, which is really bad. Fortunately for me, the Hydra count is diminished significantly, and I have crushed his economy at this point, but I'd say even though I have a big army, he's definitely got the upper hand. But best part is that the Broodlords are dead now. But as you can see, I have what looks like 20 Vikings there. That's that's quite a few, and they're not really that useful once you kill those Broodlords, especially in this matchup, because none of the Zerg units are mechanical, so you can't really land the Vikings to do anything. Now, what I actually tried to do here was make a whole bunch of siege tanks, but because and that would be the best move, but because my economy is so bad, I actually should have been focusing more on Hellions right now. Because Hellions, believe it or not, can actually do pretty well against Hydras. They can tank for the siege tanks, and they do lots of bonus damage against those light units, so it's really not bad. Siege tanks here managed to take out a few Hydras, pretty sloppy by him. But now he's got Hydras harassing everything. They're really everywhere. This is actually kind of a cool game. That's why I wanted to bring it to you guys. Because believe it or not, mech games can actually be pretty interesting like this. With these new powerful siege tanks that can really stand their ground, even in small numbers. That's what it should be, in my opinion. It's really, you know what? A lot of people have given this patch flack, but I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. I think it's great that this new patch is pretty exciting. So I'll move out because I assume that he had that base up again, but unfortunately I kind of guessed wrong. Might have been a better move to go ahead and attack the the top center location while expanding myself, or even clean up some of those Hydras. Instead I go here, and this is really not a good idea. The thing is, and a lot of you old school players will probably remember this from Brood War, but you gotta siege up strategically important places. Randomly sieging up on a high ground like this without really attacking much but creep tumors is not really doing me any good. I'm just putting my tanks at risk for no benefit. what I should be doing is moving around the map and trying to catch one of his expansions undefended. When I'm out on the map like this, I'm just putting my tanks at risk without actually gaining anything. It's really not a good idea. And as you can see, I foolishly push in again. And this is what, I know I'm being harsh on myself here, guys, but if I'm going to get to Master League, stuff like this has to end. Now, because I see that all his units are down here, I actually decide to move in with the Vikings and land them in his main and kill a few things. So I kill a whole bunch of Overlords, which is cool. Nice and always great to kill those. And the siege tanks can definitely kill his army, so I feel pretty safe right now. Now, it would have been great if I'd landed those a lot sooner, because I probably could have killed some of his key tech structures here, and maybe even the hive. In the end, I think I do get the lurker den, which is nice, but don't really get the hive, and actually lose a few Vikings, as you can see here, which isn't good. So, this whole, like I said, guys, this was a waste of time. I should have been saturating that base, getting my economy back up. Instead, I move out with the siege tanks into a very dangerous spot and end up losing massive amounts of units. He can reinforce easily here. And by the way, I know I probably have at least one Zerg player listening. If you ever see a situation like this where they've got only tanks left in their mech army, all you need to do is make Zerglings. Don't bother with those higher tier units. They're really useless compared to Zerglings. A lot of the time, what mech players will do is they'll only reinforce with siege tanks, and because Hellions are normally first to die, if the Zerg player then goes ahead and makes a big round of like 50 speedlings or something, they can actually get on top of the tanks and finish off your mech. A huge weakness there that can easily be exploited by Zerg players. So I do finally throw up that base very, very late. Should have been up during this whole time. I'm going to siege those tanks, and I'm bringing my other tanks back. My original thought was, maybe I should go and check for another base up there, but I realized I probably just need to defend right now. Wisely, I do bring the tanks back, but as you can see, he's got lots and lots of Hydras, and he intelligently decides he's not going to engage those tanks. This is how you want to play against mech, guys. Instead, he goes up the ramp. So at this point, I've got a lot of Hydras in my main. I don't have anything to defend the tanks, and he's brought speedlings here, as I just mentioned. This is a recipe for disaster for me. He does actually flank me with roaches, and that pretty much spells the end of the game. So I do tap out and say GG, and that's pretty much it. So I thought that was a really cool mech game. I hope you guys liked it. I like to show you my wins and losses because I think you can learn a lot from both. And if you have any questions or suggestions or comments in general, please go ahead and leave them. I'll be bringing lots of new videos out in the near future. So for now, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Peace out, guys.